All right. It is time for another Enough to Keep Going podcast. I am your host tonight, DBQ Hams. It feels a little bit weird to be back in the chair and the podcast since I have not been back since the first episode of the new year. So I'm glad to be back. Thank you, Game Logic and Talmaster, for keeping the conversation rolling. And thank you for allowing me to take care of a few things in the outside world. So very glad to be back here. This is Enough to Keep Going, episode 374 for the week of February 2nd. We have turned the calendar and heading into February. We've got lots of releases this month, and we've got plenty to talk about tonight as well. Joining me tonight is Game Logic, as always. How are you, Game? As you continue to adjust your microphone?
Yeah, this pop filters are always a problem because I don't like to mount it. I don't like to mount it on top because then it cuts across my face. But then when I mount it on bottom, then it falls off. So,
well, thank you for letting us see your lovely face. So glad to have you here. Let's talk about slashing through a number of lovely faces as the background is here as well. We've got Dynasty Warriors. There's a new Dynasty Warriors game that came out in the past week or two, and it looks like you picked it up. So are you a big Muso player? Have you played other Dynasty Warrior types of games, or is this one that it's been a while since you dove in, and so now it is pulling you back?
It has been a while. And I've only toe dipped. So probably accessed like one title via Game Pass or something like that. Maybe I've bought one title before. But it's interesting that you ask, am I a big Musu player? Because I think the hook here is that there's lots of stuff in here that makes it, I don't want to say less of a Musu game, but maybe Musu is why I showed up, but it's like the other stuff that's keeping me around. So the conceit in this game is the Musu stuff is the stuff that's in your face and is the stuff that obviously is used to market the game and probably what everybody who comes to the game thinks and assumes that it's about. And that stuff is very much in your windshield in the first kind of 30 minutes or so, the onboarding, etc. And and so my first few minutes with the game immediately informed and reminded me why I don't play these a lot. And that's because, it is largely, or at least again, in the presentation that's given to you right away, it's largely point your on-screen character at the largest group of enemies that you can see and then just button mash until they're all dead. But the boss character fights, in and amongst the army, give a little more flavor to me than I've experienced in the past. And again, that's probably because I've toe dipped. So, there's a lock-on button now that is a la Dark Souls. And maybe that's been there before. So, I'm going to say some things that, I don't remember having, when I've played the games before. Maybe they've been there an iteration or two. Like I said, this franchise has never been huge for me. Maybe I played the third one. I don't know, but I only hung out with it for a few times. So the lock-on button kind of leaps out to me because again, it is a Souls-like convention. And I'm sure other games have it, but that's I think of it as a Souls-like convention because it is absolutely essential in Souls, right? Like,
sure, right.
Without locking onto an enemy, like it's just an even, worse butt whooping than it is normally for me who's not a skill player.
Right. And in this case, in Dynasty Warriors, kind of traditionally back on the PlayStation 2 PSP, you are just slashing your way through hordes of, so having a lock-on button wasn't necessarily part of that initial DNA, but I could see where it could allow combat to feel a little more strategic than just kind of random.
Yeah, and so I'm really glad Tao showed up because actually this is not the first time this game has been discussed on the show. Tao actually was the first one to onboard to it, so I'm definitely interested in hearing, counters or other perspectives from Tao's perspective.
Yeah, thanks for jumping in, Tao. Glad to have you here. We're just getting started on the Dynasty Warriors talk.
So like I said, there's a lock-on button, but the other thing Tao mentioned, you mentioned a few weeks when you talked about it that it was felt a little strange, right, to you the strategic map where like you're a big avatar like walking around the map. And to me, while that might be like weird in a Dynasty Warriors game, I've been exposed to a lot of it that made it like less of a discomforting or less janky for me. That in fact that is the Tiny Tina approach to the world map. And it's been the approach for the Total War series for quite some time, and a lot of RTSs and strategy games have adopted this. They zoom you out to kind of a strategic map and let you walk around with like a big, kaiju type character, like walking around the map, deciding where you're going to go strategically, and then they zoom in whenever you have to go to battles. So that convention, again, not sure if that's entirely new, but it's something that, kind of hooked me because of the other games I've been exposed to. But then I think the third thing that kind of transcends just the hack and slashery of it for me is, of course, they've done and again, these may have been there before, but it's got a healthy amount of the RPG like content. And I don't actually say that in terms of like it being tropish. And maybe it is tropish, right? Like so much more these days, like there's even fewer pure RPGs, right? Like you see a Baldur's Gate 3 come through, and that's like a very rare instance of like a really pure, CRPG. But we see so many games that like every single one of them has RPG light elements in it, even to the point now where our sports games, right, are chock full of RPG like elements. But the ones here they're not like innovative or bombastic, but I don't know what it is, but like just the addition of those kind of simple basic RPG elements just elevates what would otherwise just be a Musu hack and slash beat 'em up kind of game. And so it has skill trees, like you will do a build, by virtue of you picking out, how you're going to progress down the skill tree. When you go to town, you can buy new weapons, and by you choosing how you're going to expand your arsenal, which ones you're going to invest your time in, which ones you're going to develop skills in, that will kind of alter your build, right? And so I'm sure like my playthrough and Tao's playthrough are significantly different, right, in terms of how we're proceeding down. So it's really good. And then I guess I said the third thing was going to be the last thing, and I guess the fourth thing I would say, and again, this may have been here before, but because of the fact that I spent last year finally getting my teeth into JRPGs and building myself up to a point now where I can deal with all that exposition, that method of storytelling, right, is in there, right? And it's in fact, it feels very JRPG like. I keep saying it's going to be the last thing. I think the fifth thing I will say, which is really the last thing, is that on top of it, there's relationship building in here, not like romance options, but in terms of like you are given kind of side missions or stepping stones or whatever of like different people to interact with, in at least in the little army that you're in. And that pops alerts that say, now your bond with whomever is strengthened. So in some ways there it is a little tropish, like in terms of like we've done a lot of like romancing the Three Kingdoms kind of stuff like over the last few years, and this is yet another game, and I don't know how many times I have either been a yellow turban or fought the yellow turbans, but we're back at it again. We're fighting the yellow turbans. So everybody at this point, despite a lot of kind of xenophobia and like America First stuff that's going on, not to be political, but I'm just saying we're in a time where like there's a super huge inner focus, whereas in the country, whereas I grew up as a kid, outwardly focused and learning about international relations and all that kind of stuff. Kids now should be very, very, very familiar with this era of Japanese history. So, the Shogun, miniseries just came out like a year or two ago. So, but yeah, I'm enjoying it more so than I thought that I would. Partially because I'm not trying to dive into games that are not Call of Duty or not my wheelhouse type of content. With any obsessive need to like finish anything. So just as something that I picked up for what will probably be 12 to 14 games this year. I'm having a good time with it.
Nice. It sounds like they've, taken a number of lessons from all the other kind of spin-off Muso games that they've done in the last 5 years or so, with the bonds aspect with Persona Strikers and Fire Emblem Warriors, and some of the skill tree stuff. That really adds some depth to it. It sounds like. Do you feel how's the balance of that? Like, do you feel like you're spending more time in management than you are kind of running along a field, or does it feel like the management aspect gives you the investment to then, when you're out running along the field along with hundreds of thousands of enemies, that you're a little more invested in the characters because you've created because of those other dynamics?
Maybe to a certain extent. I will also say, like, and again, this may be stuff that's been there before, but there's the maps and the on the battlefield stuff is, again, more interesting than I thought it would be, and maybe because I don't remember, but like even the first couple of battles, like there's a sizable map to go through, right? As you carve a route from kind of the entrance to the battlefield, like to the castle at the back or the keep at the back. There are tactical and strategic decisions to be made along the way, like which route you're going to go. The heroes are split up, so the heroes aren't all going the same way. There were different places to traverse, so I could like cut away and like flank the enemy. There was in one point there were like kind of some ladders you could climb down, traverse a canyon, and then climb back up the ladder, right, and pop out on the enemy's flank. So that all that type of stuff like leads up to like basically grinding that you get exposed to on the way, so you can pump up, like, I forget what the currency is, pump up the amount of tchotchkes or whatever that you get, so you can spend gear, but also enables you to like grind some more to gain, the equivalent of mana or whatever, so you can utilize your skills, once you get to the big boss battle and things like that. So, I mean, so yes, what you said, yes, but also there also appears to be some more kind of chunky, meaty depth, right, on the battlefield as well. That makes it a little bit more than just a Musu hack and slash. Maybe like up to 49%, right? 51% of the time is you're still just button mashing your way through, and sometimes it gets a little grindy and a little boring. But overall, I feel like it's a pretty well balanced product. If not something that's blazing a new trail, it's iterating enough and adding some things in for people who have been away from the series for a while, that may hook people. In case any of these things have been in like recent iterations, it feels like it's kind of a full package, right? Of not just giving you Musu, but giving you enough of a sprinkle of those other things to keep you engaged.
Nice. Thanks. Tao, any follow-up thoughts?
No, yeah, I mean, he had a lot of thoughts that I had when I jumped into it the first time a few weeks ago. The lock-on, I don't remember there being a lock-on before, but I mean, it's been a long time since I played one too. It's like I played the first few, like 3 or I think 4 maybe at the most, and then I kind of dropped off for until now. So I'm not sure if that lock-on thing was always there or not. That's a nice addition because obviously it locks on just to the captains or like the higher ups when you got everybody else trying to come at you. So it's kind of nice. The RPG elements, yeah. I mean, I think that along with like the kind of the side stories and just kind of the story in general, because like before it was just like, hey, this is historical China. You're going to do this thing that happened at this point in history. And now you're going to do this other thing that happened in history. But now it's just like an original story that you're kind of going through with, your own character, which is kind of nice. Although I haven't seen any way to customize that character yourself. He's kind of just, you kind of just go along as, how they created him, which it's fine, I guess. But, I like to customize people. So I was kind of like, oh, bummer. But maybe later on you can or something. I don't know. But yeah, I think those story beats too, when you break from all the action, that kind of helps, not be too grindy, because I could see that happening. Because I mean, that's why I kind of burnt out on it after like the third or fourth, edition. I'm like, all right, yeah, it's kind of just all the same all the time. So at least it's kind of a story you can follow now, and we do all these other stuff like skill tree. Even though the skill tree, as far as I know, you have to do like each one individually. It looks like, unless they all open up later on. I haven't gotten too deep into it yet, because I'm kind of just stuck on the first tier of the skill tree that's open to you at the beginning. So it's kind of interesting they did it that way, if that's how it is.
Yeah, and even with that skill tree just being open to, like, there's that skill tree like splits two ways, and you don't have to do like everything to skill tree up to like the next node. I mean, you could take a shorter route and go up just down the left or the right side. So yeah, even at the outset, it's giving you a little choice, right, in how you want to go about your build.
All right, well, let's move on. Thanks, guys. Let's move on to the next game. So I picked up, or I shouldn't say I picked up. I downloaded and started playing Eternal Strands on Xbox since it's on Game Pass. It's also out on PC and PlayStation. Eternal Strands is, I had it on my radar because Yellow Brick Games, the developer, or Yellow Brick Studio, Mike Laidlaw is the creative director for the game and one of the founders of the studio, and his kind of pedigree brings him back through Dragon Age and Mass Effect and older BioWare as well. So I was definitely interested to see where this was going to go. And the other piece that I have found with it is that, you know, at our superlative show, I talked about kind of the challenges, the financial and economic challenges around AAA games. And this definitely lands squarely in that AA aspect, in terms of both the kind of scope, feel of the game itself. The graphics look good. It's kind of a not quite fully open world, but you do have a lot of space. But it's all the graphics are kind of, I don't know, World of Warcraft-fied, right? Like they're soft. They've got the edges sanded down, so they're not looking necessarily realistic. You've got, they have an kind of animated look to them. So there's not huge amounts of detail there. You also quickly see that it is the, kind of the budget for this was not at the high tier, AAA level. This is a studio of under 100 people. That the story beats are all done in not in-game cutscenes or not pre-rendered cutscenes, that they are in animated, that they are either 2D animation or they are kind of stock cells that the text and audio comes up with. So it feels a little dated in those ways, but also feels like it's a reasonable scope for a smaller team because the gameplay, I'm really enjoying the gameplay. So kind of the setup here is, I don't know, it feels like maybe a little, it feels unique but similar to, it's got some Breath of the Wild aspects in it with its physics systems. You are a mage within this world. You've got a set of magical powers that you kind of expand on. You start with just kind of a force power, it was the purple kind of, it's just your attack power. Then you get ice, there's fire, but the physics of it are very similar in that everything has physics attached to it, so that if you start something on fire or that something careens off, the grass is going to start on fire as well. Or, that you often are, in the tutorial piece, you get ice and you're fighting a dragon. And, the game moment that really kind of hooked me was throwing ice magic at the dragon, getting a big chunk of ice stuck to its face. And as it bent down, I jump and grab onto it, almost like Shadows of the Colossus or Monster Hunter type of way, and slashing at it. And so you have a stamina bar in terms of you can basically climb anything, or at least, a variety. You can climb the monsters, you can climb walls and cliffs like in Breath of the Wild. You have a similar stamina bar. And so it opens up kind of the way that you may want to approach it. But it's not, you're still kind of bounded to some degree in terms of the battle areas. Has been reading reviews that some of those do get even more bounded, as one of the, like, poison mist comes in and narrows things in or creates different spaces as you're in a fight. But so the combat's enjoyable. and it's a little bit of magic projectile and kind of traditional hack and slash, kind of an action RPG. Definitely some RPG pieces. You've got a good skill tree here. You've got lots of, no surprise for classic BioWare, you've got lots of codex entries and text entries. They do a really good job of world building, and I found myself, I'm only 90 minutes in, 2 hours maybe, not huge, but even after the first hour, I was like, it feels really nice to be in a new mythology, a new world, right? This is not an existing IP, that they get to kind of have the freedom to create what they want. And it certainly takes on some similar, fantasy molds, but has a unique story that it's at least telling at this point. It doesn't feel like I know where the story beats are all going, and also the kind of the world building seems to be is done well, right? It's engaging. It's got me interested to keep playing. So yeah, it's again, from all the reviews, it's about a 20 to 30 hour game, it sounds like. And it also sounds like maybe it stretches a little longer than it might need to. But from what it does, and the combat system and kind of the flexibility that creates with a variety of magics, it's, I don't know, it's made it kind of, it's, I don't know, I guess the word I'm looking for is freewheeling, right? Like in those best Breath of the Wild moments when you kind of have multiple ways to approach something, that this captures that as well, except with one of the things I wished was in a Breath of the Wild was a skill tree and more RPG aspects and progression. And this is not nearly at the scope of a Breath of the Wild, or certainly not at some of the polish. Even some of the loading, pop-ins, and textures still happens. But for a new IP and from a startup studio, it's a great first outing. So I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, it looks really interesting. I had heard about this before, but unfortunately, I was going to try to play it, but I didn't get a chance this weekend. But yeah, just looking at some of the videos now, I like how like you mentioned, like the fire, it kind of like burns the area. That effect doesn't stay. Obviously, it goes away.
Yeah.
And then with the ice, like instead of just like straight up freezing somebody, which she kind of does at some point in some of these videos, but she can kind of just like build a wall to kind of protect herself. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, it does a lot with physics. I was reading a game developer article about it in terms of how they talked about having kind of attaching physics to everything, and also the way that they do it is, I think they talked about it in terms of like temperature, so that every item in the world has a temperature, or so that depending on what type of attack, it's going to increase, decrease, or kind of twist that temperature as part of how they kind of map things out. So, which was interesting to think about in terms of just design and development.
Yeah, and I don't know why when I'm watching the video, for some reason, it reminds me, not so much, maybe it's the movement and kind of the world, but it kind of reminds me of Valheim a little bit. Just kind of the aesthetics. Like obviously, it's a lot more, like graphically, it's a lot better looking than Valheim, because that's like an open, like an MMO type-ish game, like you can play, with a lot of people. But
I think the color palette is probably similar
Yeah.
in some of those spaces. Yeah, with a lot of greens and openness.
yeah, the fidelity is a lot better with the characters and the creatures too. They're like a little, like I thought Valheim was a little too polygonal. Like a little, they're not as defined as this game, but it reminds me a lot of it.
Yeah.
So
Looks like you were saying something, Game Logic.
So Death Stranding made this. I mean, there was I don't know what you want to call it. There was a like Death Stranding was actually a thing, like in the game. Like it wasn't just like the title of the thing. Is Eternal Strands saying something here in the title? Is there like some metaphysical or like philosophical thing that it's referencing when in the game's title?
I would say yes. I mean, again, not far enough in to know all the ins and outs, but the strand, you are kind of, there is a protected veil realm, not necessarily a veil like the Dragon Age in terms of kind of beyond the living realm, but in kind of you at the very beginning of the game, you kind of come into this kind of protected area that hasn't been pierced and explored since the last catastrophe of the giants that came. But the strands are very much tied to the magic and the different abilities there. So yes, it's playing on kind of the mythology and lore of the game world.
There's another question I was going to ask you. I missed it. I wrote it down somewhere. Okay, so I'm sorry. So in what you were just saying is, so you haven't been exposed yet to like, is there a thing in the game that is like eternal strands, or is there like a lore or something around?
Yeah, I mean the strands are your connection to the magic. So it kind of plays into that a little bit, and you have a stronger connection than many others before you, right? Like, so.
And I apologize if I missed it. So in the strands, is there like a skill tree or a thing like?
Yes, definitely. Yep, definitely some skill tree options here. Yep. So you've got a little bit of build, and there's there's some crafting aspects in it as well as you're collecting items and materials. So you kind of start off in this hub kind of sanctuary space that has a lot of things that you're coming back to, it seems like, as you continue to progress in terms of some of those other mechanics, unlocking abilities, things like that.
And again, I apologize for missing. What are the sort of the strands, like earth, wind, and fire, like elements, or? Yeah,
it's kind of a safe bet there in terms of you get some ice, as Tao was talking about. Fire, you get kind of a just kind of a, not necessarily a projectile, but kind of just your traditional magic like beam aspect, right? There's some poison mist that comes along. I think that I'm not that far in yet. I would guess that you probably get some control over that at the point as well. So yeah, this was definitely one I had put on my Steam wish list when I was looking through stuff coming out early in the year, and then kind of stumbled onto remembering and realizing that it was on Game Pass as well. So
okay, yeah, that's what was I going to ask. So is it? Do you know like what tiers it's at, or I can't now? I'm not remembering exactly how the new Game Pass works, but
I don't think it's on standard yet. I think it's on Ultimate. So, yep, because it was a day one release on Ultimate.
Okay, gotcha.
Yep, I think it's also on PC as well. All right, let's move into our news headlines. We've got a number of ones. Tao, your first one here is one that I was excited about as somebody who had just recently used Internet Archive to go back to some early 2000s video game magazines. You've got something coming here from the Video Game History Foundation.
Yeah, so just real quick on the Video Game History Foundation. They're a nonprofit organization dedicated to preserving, celebrating, and teaching the history of video games. So some of the projects that they're doing, they're trying to do like source code preservation, just educating the public. They have like a blog and podcast and stuff where you can, listen to them talk about, video game history. But tonight, what I'm going to talk about is they have released into early access, is what they're saying, is a sorry, I'm trying to click through the things here. An online library of game magazines, which I thought was pretty cool. Because at first when I saw this, I thought it was just like general, video game stuff. But then as I was reading further, they have basically, I don't want to say every magazine out there, but they have a lot of video game magazines just throughout time. Nintendo Power, Game Pro, EGM, stuff like that. And also they actually pulled this stuff from not only their private collections, but people have donated materials and stuff like that. So it's actually, that was pretty cool that they're doing this. And you can go to their site. They have just like a general search, so you can search for like a magazine if you want, or you can jump to magazines. They also have production or like promotional materials that you can look up and read through and stuff. So I thought it was a pretty cool idea for them to bring this online to everybody, because I used to have like a ton of like Game Pros and Nintendo Powers, and of course, as I've moved, and I was like, you know what, I don't need this anymore. I've gotten rid of it. So it's kind of fun to go back and look at these magazines and just kind of read through them and all this other stuff. But the other thing too, which I thought was really cool, was all the promotional stuff. Like they have like interviews with like developers and just like press kits and all kinds of stuff like that. So I thought that was really cool that they're doing something like this. But yeah, I just thought it was kind of cool thing to bring up, and you could use this maybe when you're doing your research.
Yeah, no, it's been great, and the Video Game History Foundation has really done some great work. They've been real intentional in their curation here. They've been reaching out to a number of both individuals, also as print, as websites and print has shut down in different spaces. They've been kind of reaching out to, I know that they reached out to the Game Informer people as they were closing off. As studios close, they try to reach out to them as well. They've been very proactive in trying to curate this collection in addition to just getting donations. So hey, Rich, thanks for jumping in and joining us. Glad to have you here. And, you'll get to Death Stranding just in time for maybe the next hint of Death Stranding 2 over the summer. So, Game Logic, why don't you take us into our next one as we talk about some awards, or at least nominees.
Yep. And Rich, thanks so much for coming through. We appreciate you for stopping by on the live show. This news story over on Digital Trends by Giovanni Colantanio. Astrobot, Black Myth, Wukong lead Game Developers Choice Award nominees. The Game Developers Conference, event, whatever you want to call it, otherwise known as GDC, about to go down here in March, if I'm not mistaken. And so it is kind of I mean, it's really a conference about for developers. I think of it less as like E3 and more like WWDC, the Apple event for developers that they hold in the summer usually. But out of it, they also do this award show, which has gotten more and more big time over the last few years. I'm not as much of an Alana Pierce fan as I may have been at one time, but she hosted last year, if I'm not mistaken. The show will also be live again this year. And so for the 2025 nominees, Astrobot and Black Myth Wukong got the most nominations. So both of them locked down 7. In the field for Game of the Year, they are up. Both of them are, again, Astrobot and Black Myth Wukong are up against Balatro, Helldivers 2, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and Metaphor ReFantasio. So my only concern or comment, a few weeks ago on the Basement Radio Arcade podcast, we were talking to David Jaffe, who stopped by the show, and he and I were both mentioning how for the DICE Awards, there was a lot more diversity than we would have expected, that a lot more games kind of got brought into the conversation. My only nit, as we're now seeing kind of the third, or actually the fourth of the big 4. I mean, this is the last of the big game awards, right? So the Golden Joysticks, TGAs, DICE, and now GDC, and that kind of rounds out like the big 4 that are compared to, I don't know, the Grammys, the AMAs, and whatever the two big those are ones we talk about. And when we talk about the significance of Baldur's Gate 3 from last year, we say the first game that ever swept all 4 major award shows. These are the 4 major award shows we're talking about. And my only nit is that it seems like across those 4 award shows, we really saw to the greatest extent the same games up for nomination. Even though it's great that Balatro got nominated, it's great that Helldivers 2 got nominated. Those coming from indie studios, although Helldivers 2 is not necessarily an indie game because it was published by Sony and backed by Sony. Other games that kind of broke out, a few indie games. Animal Well is up for 5 awards, including Best Design. And then 1000 Times Resist got 3 nominations.
Yeah, they're in there for best narrative. Yep. Also, you get some places where you do see some things like Mouthwashing, the kind of low res horror game ends up under narrative. Sasuna Hellblade 2 gets technology nominations. So there are some places where I think Animal Well pops up a lot more I've seen here than I did in some of the other ones. But yeah, you're right. In terms of kind of catching the big names, there's not anything new coming in that Game of the Year category.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah. So yes, you get more kind of scattershot and a wider spread across the categories for each of these shows. But yeah, that was my main point, is that for the Game of the Year nomination for these categories, we've essentially seen, the same 4 games, I guess, at the core, maybe 5. I think DBQ mentioned a few of these, but Hellblade 2 up for Best Audio. There were a couple other kind of breakouts that I want to mention. Like a Dragon: Infinite Wealth up for Best Narrative.
UFO
Hellblade,
50 was in there.
I'm sorry, what's that?
UFO 50 was in there for innovation.
Yep. Hellblade 2 up for Best Technology. Life is Strange: Double Exposure up for Social Impact. So, it's good to see kind of some also rans, games that were kind of hovering around like the periphery of like the big conversations for the year, get nominated for GDCs. Across the spectrum. Oh no, actually, it's 5 shows that I'm thinking about, because I forgot about the BAFTAs. I can't remember. I want to say by this, maybe the BAFTAs are in February. They're either in February or they're in April. They either come right before GDC or right after. I can't remember which. We'll have to look that up. But
BAFTAs are coming in middle of February.
Okay. Yep. So there we go. And then when GDC lands in March, that will round us out for the year. Across the spectrum, the TGAs get beat up a lot because they are like the show that is primarily the media. The BAFTAs is backed by an association that is kind of like the Academy a little bit, but the AIAS, I think, is a little more credible in terms of like there are a lot more creators in there, whereas the Academy is, to me, I mean, there are some current creators in the Academy, definitely, but I feel like the Academy consists of a lot of has-beens who are not like actively in the creative pipeline and process right now. DICE is the one that's big to me because it is entirely people who are in the industry, and it's actually locked down to the point where like you have to actually be a subject matter expert in that field to vote in that category, right? So best audio design is only voted on by actual audio engineer, sound engineer. Like you have to be in a labor category that's an accepted labor category for that field to vote. There's a little bit of, people don't take it. People try and take some shine off of it as being the most genuine award show because it is an association that requires you to pay dues. And so your developers who are part of smaller indie studios tend not to make as much money and then therefore tend not to pay dues. But the GDC is a little bit of a mix between it. It's backed primarily by the GameDeveloper.com, the website, which used to be Game of Sutra. And it's kind of a weird mix between like some people in the industry and the media. So it's kind of like a middle ground.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see as we hit this kind of award season for between BAFTAs and DICE and the GDC. So Let's go ahead and move on to our next news story. We're going from celebrating some games to missing some games in this next one. Game Logic, do you want to take on some games we're missing from Roll 7?
Yeah, this news story over on PC Games End by Ken Alsop. Stylish indie games Ollie Ollie World and Roller Dome have been delisted from Steam. Indie games Ollie Ollie World and Roller Dome have been delisted from sale on the Steam store. The pair of stylish skating games from developer Roll 7, both of which are charming, fun, and boast excellent user ratings of 90 and 91% respectively, are currently unavailable to buy via the Valve Marketplace. The change comes in the wake of Take-Two's sale of indie publishing label Private Division in November of last year. I put the story in the rundown because I obviously played tons of Ollie Ollie World, I think, which was a 2022 game.
Yeah, we really loved it here on this show. Yep.
Yeah, to the point where I did several runs across, I think, every platform it was available on. So I played it on Xbox, played it on PlayStation, played it on Nintendo Switch, played it on PC. Really can't talk enough about how I love that game, and not even get game. I mean, it's a little in my wheelhouse in that it's a little kind of like Trials, which again edges kind of onto like the vehicle simulation space, but in some ways, you could also consider it like a platformer. And so not in my wheelhouse, but it just fell in this place that really grabbed me. So it's unfortunate to see it go away. Hopefully, this is a temp situation while licenses are changing hands.
I wonder about that. Like if they get another publisher for it during this, just because Private Division no longer exists, that it can't publish games. So then they need to kind of cycle that through to some degree, hopefully.
Yeah, and so this would require the game, being re-uploaded, via somebody else's dashboard under a different account. So hopefully that will happen. I mean, in this day where we're so concerned about game preservation because things like this happen. Two of my favorite games of all time, Freelancer and No One Lives Forever 1 and 2, caught in licensing hell. And the way I have to look at things now is like, man, if GoldenEye could come back, then hopefully those games could come back too. So hopefully these also will not get imprisoned and kept away.
Yeah, the Steam pages are still up. Hopefully that means it is more temporary. But you want to take on the next game, the next news story as well, in terms of coming from game developer?
Yeah, this news story over on GameDeveloper.com, as we mentioned earlier, formerly Game of Sutra by Justin Carter. Prince of Persia: Lost Crown sold 1.3 million copies in its first year. According to a now deleted LinkedIn resume and spotted by somebody, Ubisoft's Prince of Persia: Lost Crown has sold 1.3 million copies since its launch in late January 2024. Alexandra Genunu, an associate marketing director for the publisher, cited the action.
Is that the official pronunciation there?
I have no idea. It's
been
a long time since I spoke French on a regular basis. So an associate marketing director for the publisher cited the action side scroller as a multi-awarded game, which hit the aforementioned benchmark within its first year. The game released on Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4 and 5, PC, and Xbox One and Series XS to solid reviews. However, Ubisoft obviously late last year took the decision that there was going to be no more Prince of Persia, The Lost Crown. There wasn't going to be any more DLC, broke the team apart, sent the majority of the employees, as far as I know. I think a few people lost their jobs, but I think the majority of the employees were scattered to other studios.
That's how I remember that story as well, is that they kind of scattered to the wind within Ubisoft and its multiple studios. So yeah, that development team, that was a game I picked up over the holiday break, and just coming back to it after almost a year, it's still so solid. So it is kind of disappointing to know that team is not getting another chance to do something. But nice to know that it's sold respectfully. Although maybe not the numbers that Ubisoft has been looking for in this challenging year of kind of not performing to the same sales as they were hoping for.
Yeah, and it's tough. I mean, I'm even getting to the point. So earlier in the week, I wrote a post on Twitter, which was a little bit of kind of pundit pushback, because I think we get a lot of pundits in the space who say, the reason Concore failed is because it was a paid game. It would have been fine if it were free to play. If you only make your game live, like there's no point in making any game other than live service games because that's the thing that sells. If you only put enough content in your live service game, it will survive. If you only do and coming out of the world of software engineering, we have a key statement that we always make, which is there are no silver bullets. That is a mantra and a thumb rule. In the development space, what it is like no, by virtue of going to the cloud, that doesn't fix everything. By virtue of coding our UI and React, doesn't fix so there is no one thing, and that is how I characterize the gaming industry. There is no one thing. But I'm even getting to the point now where user numbers and sale numbers, we had the situation last year where we took a pause on the PlayStation blog. These are the most downloaded games, right? And when Matt Piscatella started doing the same thing, we started asking a lot of questions about what games were on the list, what games weren't on the list. We're like, hold on a second, this doesn't translate to the revenue numbers that we see. So what do these numbers actually mean? And at that point, I kind of said, okay, it took me a month or two to get there, but finally I just said, look, engagement numbers, I don't know that they mean anything anymore. We of course have had kind of the Xbox thing where they report 15 million, 20 million people played Forza Horizon 5, but then you pop achievements and it's it seems like a very basic achievement, but it says it's rare, right? For the people. Definitely was the case with Senua's Sacrifice. So all in all, we had the thing last week, 2 weeks ago, where the Veilguard, EA didn't report sales numbers. They reported 1.5 million people played the game, but we don't know how that translates to financial performance. So I'm just coming to the point where I don't even know that these numbers even mean anything. 1.3 million copies sold. The game sold for, what was it, $40?
I think it was 50. Yeah.
So, we don't, obviously we rarely know what the budget is. Often we can guess or we get insider information, but when you're at one, it's Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. It was a Metroidvania, a complete swerve in terms of what people historically believe Prince of Persia is, because the vast majority of the gaming addressable market now thinks of Prince of Persia in terms of the 3D games that were on PlayStation 2 and forward. Whereas in fact, Prince of Persia: Lost Crown actually is much more akin to the original Prince of Persia in a lot of ways. At first you say 1.3 million copies. Oh yeah, that was a dud and it was a flop. And I'm like, well, time out. Hold on a second. Dragon Age: The Veilguard has much more mind share in terms of recency and in terms of kind of a bring your own customer base. But it only had 1.5 million people engaged.
And significantly, based on what I know from Lost Crown's development team, a significantly larger development team over the course of a decade at BioWare.
And budget. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Very much so. Right. I think that this was scoped, again, going back to talking about Eternal Strands, Prince of Lost Crown was scoped, Prince of Persia: Lost Crown was scoped in such a way that 1.3 million copies is not actually probably a bad return. It may not, obviously was not the return that Ubisoft was looking for based on how they treated that team.
Yeah, and I guess where I'm coming down to is so much, to me now, so much more of it is relative. Not absolutely, okay, 1.3 million, did it make its money back? Was it profitable? Maybe not, right? I haven't gone off and done, but I could do calculations based on expected salaries, right? And come up with, did that hit a bogey or not? But again, I don't know that necessarily means anything, because now so much it's so relative. Xbox financials just came out with Microsoft financials earlier this week. We didn't put it in the rundown because I don't know that there's a ton of point in going through it. But one of the numbers that was cited was Indiana Jones, 4 million people engaged. Again, I look at numbers that get reported on Xbox engagement versus what happens when you pop achievements. Is that good for Indiana Jones? Good for Indiana Jones in that it's an off skew kind of, I don't want to say out of note, but kind of out of left field, kind of different kind of a thing than what you normally get from machine games. And good critical reviews and getting up for awards. So relatively a good number, but any effort to extrapolate financial performance off of that, and did it do what it needed for the Game Pass needle moved to 2%, right? In the same, and that's the same quarter that Call of Duty was released. I would probably attribute a lot more of that 2% right, to Call of Duty than Indiana Jones. So, like, again, I just come around to, I just don't know how much, these numbers mean anymore as absolutes. Maybe there's a point in us continuing to talk about them in the future in terms of like relative, which is all dependent upon the publishers giving us one-to-one common metrics, which of course we know doesn't happen that often.
No, those days are well past. Well, let's move off from sales numbers to some other numbers, but still stay on Ubisoft here. So we've got a couple news stories dealing with some layoffs and shutdowns, but let's start the first one at Ubisoft.
Yeah, this is a news story over on Engadget by Chris Holt. Ubisoft shuts down a sports studio and lays off 185 workers. Following a string of misfires, Ubisoft is shutting down a support studio and downsizing elsewhere, with the company firing around 185 workers in its latest cost-cutting measure. Ubisoft Leamington, situated in the English town of Royal Leamington Spa, is no more, as the publisher is scuttling the 50-person studio. It's also laying off employees in Stockholm, Dusseldorf, Germany, and Newcastle, England. Tao, do you know, was this a studio that was supporting XDefiant? Or was this something else?
I think this is something else. I don't recognize the name.
Looks like the studio had done some support work on The Division, Outlaws, Skull and Bones, Far Cry.
They were, unfortunately, they've been the one helping out with all of the games that are kind of in the cross, like Star Wars Outlaws and Skull and Bones. Yep. Since they also assisted on Far Cry 5, but I think Far Cry 5 is one of their bonga hits over the last few years, and continues to sell well in like the post getting the money off your balance sheet, sales burn. So.
What I didn't realize about the studio is that it was previously known as Freestyle Games, which was it was under Activision and the DJ Hero team back in the DJ Hero was early teens.
Yeah, it's a flash in the pan though, right? I think it showed up at like one E3, but it was like a weird spin-off of like Guitar Hero or whatever. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it was only one release, and you had the turntable and the Guitar Hero type buttons. Yep. So the next studio shutdown, or the game shutdown, is coming out of, we'll move from Ubisoft over to Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers is shutting down Multiverses. So Multiverses came out in beta 2 years ago, went offline. They relaunched it last May, and it seemed like engagement, just going back to numbers again, right? This is a free-to-play game, so going back to engagement numbers seem to continually decline over the rest of 24. They're in their 5th season of content, but it will be their last, and they are kind of shutting down online play at the end of May this year. As of Friday, when this news story went live, they had shut down in-game purchases, but they are offering or allowing it to be played offline with a local multiplayer aspect. I think the piece here, the shutting down of it, is not necessarily that surprising, because it didn't seem to really sustain within significant areas. I guess I say that in conversations that I've had with my kids who are follow platform fighters, and we're all ready for Rivals of Aether 2, and kind of know that genre, that even they were like, yeah, their Discord groups online around this seem to have kind of slowly faded in terms of activity. But the surprising piece for me here is that Warner Brothers acquired the developer, Player First Games. They bought them last year. Granted, where this is all coming on the heels of some management turnover at Warner Brothers. So the games president, David Haddad, stepped down, and so they're in kind of a transition period here. So, it'll be interesting to again, Ubisoft. See, I'm talking about Ubisoft. Warner Brothers had, they had their kind of investor call toward the end of in December, I believe, where they talked about, or maybe even just beginning of January, about how much they were writing off, how sales they did not hit their targets based on projections, both with multiverses and with Suicide Squad, as they talked about their live service games. So the writing was on the wall here, but it also seems strange to buy up a company or buy up a developer, and then where are they shipping them off to as well? So any thoughts here, Game Logic?
Just to say, this was the story that caused me to write that Twitter post that, like, let's stop banning about the the silver bullet. I mean, because my comment was, so for all you guys running around saying that all you have to do is make your game free to play, here's a free to play game, right? And it didn't make it. And we have tons of other free to play games that didn't make it. Like, it's not. I don't buy that the singular problem with Concord would have been solved by making it free to play.
Yeah, and plus this one had like known IPs with it. So
well, that's what I was saying. It's also licensed, huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, Concord was much more of a market situation, and if something like this game, which is free to play, there's not many other platform fighters out there in terms of, and none that are significant IPs and free to play. So it seemed to definitely have the potential to find a market for itself. But again, I think the question of what studios are looking for, what publishers are looking for, like how big that market needs to be in order to sustain the kind of live service model.
Well, it's also weird. Like, I didn't play the game just because I am not an online fighting game. Like, I love playing fighting games. I don't play fighting games online. Like, I mean, movement kitties and super sweats are hard enough, like in Call of Duty. Like, I just don't need like the even more hyper crowd that's over on fighting games online. But the IP here speaks squarely to me, my generation, you guys. I mean, this is essentially the Laugh Olympics. Great. I don't know if you guys remember that, but I mean, it was the thing where like all like the Warner Brothers and
Hanna-Barbera.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So you had like, you had the what were they? The Yogi Yogis or whatever. And, you had all the bad guys on one team, and it was an opportunity to see something like Blue Falcon, show up with like Scooby-Doo. Right. So you had this big crossover of all these IPs from both adventure and comedy and stuff. And that's kind of what they're doing here. But, just didn't do what it needed to do.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to one more layoff story here. As I was talking about Mike Laidlaw with Eternal Strands at Yellow Brick Studios, that this next story comes about BioWare and some layoffs as well. Game Logic?
Yeah, this new story over on The Verge by Jay Peters. BioWare hit with layoffs as it shifts to next Mass Effect. And it's kind of weird because we mentioned like some fear of this, right? And concern that when we got the numbers about Dragon Age the Veilguard, right, not hitting what EA wanted it to, was something going to happen to the studio. And I actually opined at the time, I don't know that I would be that fearful about something happening in the studio. They've got Mass Effect coming up. Like, there's plenty of work, for people, but here we go. BioWare now has fewer than 100 employees after laying off around 24 staffers and shifting others to different projects at EA. Changes follow BioWare's own studio update published this week, saying that the studio had worked diligently over the past few months to match many of our colleagues with other teams at EA that had open roles. Doesn't
part of this, the follow-up with this, or that came out around the same time, is that the new Mass Effect game is not at the place where all those people could come to, right? That they are still in kind of the pre-production stages. And so, they had people out there from BioWare, like, we're at the right size for where we're at now in this game, which goes back to thinking about the timeline of this and EA's willingness of how long they're going to invest in this, is that if 4 years out from announcing the game, that they're still in the pre-production stages. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course the weird thing, where people will get frustrated is, of course, because they haven't shown Mass Effect, right? So there has been no official announcement. So of course what will happen.
Well, there's been an official announcement at the Game Awards 4 years ago. I mean, they had a pre-rendered kind of teaser. So it's officially out there, but nothing has happened since then.
Yeah. So I feel like that's still not the big like recruitment announcement, but eventually that will happen. And the sad, sorry thing will be they'll hire droves of people, right? Because then they'll be at the point where they're ready to, onboard like 100 more team members to get the thing going. And these people who have gotten laid off could very well like get their jobs back, if they were willing to come back to EA, which, I would find crazy. But of course, Psygnosis, who had been, shut down by PlayStation, eventually, renamed their studio and then allowed themselves to get bought by PlayStation again and then shut down again. So, stranger things have happened. But
yeah, I haven't heard of the Psygnosis studio in quite a while. So nice pull there.
Yeah.
All right, let's go ahead. Anything else on this one?
I was just to say that's the unfortunate thing is, with the industry the way it is right now, and you not being able to predict like which trend should you be chasing, which trend, if you chase it now, is still going to be viable 3 to 5 years from now when you finally launch the game. It's just
yeah, right. Going back to the Air Concord example of the development time and trying to predict what the industry market is going to be by the time that a game is ready to ship is really difficult, which makes it hard to pull the trigger on big investments, and and that has a big trickle down effect in terms of how long of a leash something has to make a name for itself, and even for all the money that Ubisoft put into X-Defiant, that was pulled relatively quickly as well. So let's move off some news stories in terms of layoffs, and let's get a little bit of our weekly graphics card and tech update from Game Logic. Before we do that, Laura, thanks for joining us. Glad to have you here. But we've got some information or some updates on DLSS on the NVIDIA cards.
Yeah, and I won't go into this in huge depth. This news story is over on PC World by Michael Kreider. If you want to head over there, the link is in the show notes for you to run it, chase it down. NVIDIA unleashes DLSS 4 goodies for RTX cards going back to 2018. So the big story here is many, many, many times NVIDIA kind of tries to force you to upgrade. I mean, Windows did it too when they originally locked like DirectX. Well, I mean, DirectX 12 is still locked behind Windows 10 and Windows 11. So, but many is the time that something new comes out on an NVIDIA card and they don't allow it to be backwards compatible with previous cards because they want you to upgrade. And so in this case, we thought pretty certainly that this is what was going to happen with DLSS 4 as well. But they're actually taking, I don't think that they're wholesale forklifting DLSS 4 to backwards compatible cards, but there's a number of some things that they're going to allow to go backwards. And so enhanced DLSS frame generation is going to come to the 4000 series cards. And then DLSS reconstruction, DLSS super resolution beta, and the deep learning anti-aliasing DLAA beta is actually going back to the 4000, 3000, and 2000 series cards. So the super fast DLSS multi-frame generation that I think can make up to 3 or 4 interpolated frames is going to only be on the 5000 series cards, but you will get DLSS frame generation, the enhanced algorithm also rolled out to the 4000 series cards, which should help you with performance if you want extra frames. And I understand that there are lots of people running around saying, but yes, but the frames are fake. And I will say it's a video game. Everything is fake. So, I mean, this to me is absolutely no different than, I mean, it is 3D acceleration. And so everything that we've done to get things out of a rendering pipeline faster has all been oriented around fake frames. They're just frames at a potentially lower image fidelity. But again, that's what we've always done, right? I mean, there's always been instances of frames with greater visual fidelity. The faster we make things go, we tend to drop the visual quality at various points within the rendering pipeline. So, if they just hadn't called it anything, you would have taken it and not complained about it one iota, because it would have just seemed like everything else we've been doing since the late 90s when 3D acceleration started.
Here we go. Just reading Warwana's chat. Thanks for bringing that up there, Game Logic. Any other thoughts on the news stories before we round into the final segment?
Yeah, so Warwana, his comments are, I think it's just to not allow people to call them fake when these frames do not lower input latency with the other frames being higher. Well, so of course, Wara, I'm not saying anybody can't call them fake frames. I'm just saying, in my perspective, there's all sorts of elements of the rendering pipeline that's fake. My big thing is at the end of the day, it's another methodology that's being used amidst a huge bowl of technobabble salad that's associated with GPU rendering and GPU 3D acceleration. And it's just a matter of picking the one. I mean, that's the wonder of PC. You pick the ones that you want. You don't enable the ones that you don't. And at the end of the day, you get certain performance out of a card. And if you don't want that, then you can not upgrade. But if you upgrade and you don't like it, you can turn those features off. And that gives you a certain amount of performance. So that's why I'm saying, just in my mind, the paradigm isn't any different than what it's always been.
Great. All right, let's move into our third segment here with our round robin. And I'm going to turn it back over to Tao and Game Logic to check in on Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and where you two are at with it.
Yeah, so Season 2 had just came out last week. Wednesday, I believe it was, or Tuesday, I think it was, officially. So we've been playing that. Jumped on the Battle Pass just because I had saved up the in-game currency from the previous season, so I was able to buy that along with the Black Cell, which is kind of like their higher tier Battle Pass that kind of unlocks some of the stuff, automatically, and then you get some bonuses and stuff like that. And you actually do get a bonus. I think it's a 10% bonus for XP, which is always on with the Black Cell, which is kind of nice. And I got to play with Game Logic, who popped in to my game. I think it was Friday. I think it was. Who totally freaked me out at first. I forgot to tell you, but I heard you talking. I hear you say hello, hello. I thought I had turned on my in-game voice, chat. All of a sudden, I'm like, why is that on? And then I heard you say Tao. I'm like, what's going on? So finally, I figured out. Oh, and then I thought I had turned on one of our videos or something somehow, because I had YouTube on the other screen, but it was just him that had jumped in. So that was cool that we were able to play. Hopefully, we'll get to play some more going forward. So they did introduce 2 maps. There's going to be 3 altogether in this season. 2 initially, and then 1, I think, mid-season. I forgot the name of the one map I had fun and play. I think it was Burnout. It's in that condo or the high-rise building. I finally played.
There's dealership.
Okay.
Which is the car dealership.
The car dealership, yeah. That one I haven't played yet. I haven't seen that one yet.
Yeah, and then I guess that high-rise one is called Burnout.
Yeah, so I played that one finally, after, I think, a couple days after we played. So that's actually pretty cool, because on either side of the building, you can actually go outside the building. There's scaffolding, and there's some other signs and stuff that you can kind of jump on and kind of flank the people, which, once again, just like in was it Skyline, nobody uses that tunnel in Skyline. No one seems to be using those outside edges. Maybe they just don't know it, because it is a new map. But I saw a few people finally using it after I think they probably saw me. But majority of the time I've played that map, though, I haven't seen a lot of people jumping onto that part. So, but it's fairly large-ish, I guess, kind of multi-tiered.
And it's actually called Bounty.
Oh, okay, Bounty.
Yeah.
I knew it was
I didn't remember. And actually, they did drop 3 maps with the launch. Lifeline was the 3rd map.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Which is the boat.
Oh, okay. Cool. Yeah, I haven't seen that one yet either. The dealership one, I was kind of interested, because that looked pretty cool, but I haven't seen that one come up yet. So it's kind of weird, unless it's they're locked into game modes, which sometimes I guess seems to happen sometimes. But
now I think Lifeline. So Lifeline is it's confusing. It's, as far as I can tell, it is not a game mode this year, but the maps are still labeled with the name of the old mode that was Face Off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I've been playing a good bit of that. didn't get to play last night, but last couple nights before that. So yeah, it's been fun on that season so far. And then I think they have a new gun in the battle pass. I can't remember what it was. I think it might be an SMG, maybe another one. Seems to be a lot of those that they kind of release, but I haven't got to that point yet. I'm like 2, maybe 3 pages into the battle pass now, so chugging along on that. I got a crap ton of double experience that they keep dishing out, so I got to start using those. I keep forgetting about them, but yeah, I don't know. What's your thoughts so far in the season game?
I'm having fun with it. I got bamboozled by Lifeline because I swore when I saw the picture of it in the video that it was actually hijacked, but it's not hijacked. It's Lifeline 2. That's part of my I like the new maps, but I also remove Nuketown from the rotation, you cowards. I kind of feel like, hey, let's go ahead and bring back Shoot House and what was the other one? There have been 2 that have been on my hijacked was one of them. Shipment. Nuketown has been in the rotation, I think, for 5 years. And I'm just like, okay, if we have to have a legacy map, I don't know that it always needs to be Nuketown. So I'd like to actually see some different legacy maps come back. But in general, I'm fine with anything. I kind of like the new Overdrive mode. It is a little bit like the Die Hard mode and a little bit like I want to say, was it what year was it that they had the it was like an airfield map like in South America? I want to say maybe that was Modern Warfare 2.
Yeah, I think that was one of the Modern Warfares. Yeah.
But yeah, so but yeah, I mean the maps are fine. I'm having a good time with them. I did the same way. I've been assessing the economy of the Black Cell pass, and it's $30, but you immediately get it 100 COD points is $1. The Black Cell pass is $30. It gets you the battle pass plus some plus an additional, I think 20 tiers of additional content. But the key thing is it also gives you 2,200 COD points, which is $22. You pay $30 for it, you immediately get $22 of in-game currency back. Yes, I get it. They're fattening people up, right, to stuff you like a turkey so that you can spend more stuff in game. Fine, I get it. But my point is that I don't feel it's this egregious thing beyond the battle pass. You get $22 of in-game currency back immediately. You also get 20 battle pass skip tokens. So I just immediately use mine plus the leftover ones that I had from last season. And I'm on to page 5 of the battle pass already. So
yeah, that gets you 3 or 4 tiers, I think, right away. But just with that,
right.
So
yeah.
Plus the little bonus before
the
battle
10% kicker on battle pass. Yeah, it's beyond, because I think you already get a 10% with battle pass, so it's 10% on top of the 10% or something like that. So
yeah,
but we're having a fun time with this season, just like I did last one. So it's all good.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the new mode too. It's actually pretty nice. I was surprised one time. I think we were down I was 120. I think you go to 150 in that, the stars or whatever you have to collect, or there's the points. We were down 120 to 70. I was like, oh, we're not going to win this. And then we came back and won just because the way that mode works, because it's as you're killing people, you get buffs too when you're killing people in that mode. So I think it's speed and maybe health or something. You get a little bit more.
It's reloads too. That's the huge one. When you're playing that mode, if you get it, I've gotten it a couple times when I'm carrying LMGs. So that's just a huge equalizer when all of a sudden now I can load my LMG as quickly as some other guy can load an assault rifle. And yeah, Warwana mentions what I still don't understand is the tier skips to begin with. The people spending surely finish the pass with that. Yeah, yes. I mean, if you play for the whole season. So last season, I started 6 weeks late. I didn't start till December 20th something. I was again 6 weeks into the season. And so I bought the Black Cell Pass near the end. I was 84% complete with the Battle Pass. So if I had been playing since the very beginning, I would have definitely unquestionably finished the Battle Pass. And now I would have finished the Battle Pass when I play for a whole season. So, but yeah, I mean, and then if you don't use them, like if you finish the battle pass anyway, if you hold on to the tokens, then you just roll them forward and use them later. Like they don't expire. So
Nice. All right. Yeah, as always, I'd be interested to see how season 2 goes for you two. It's great that you got a chance to connect in game and play a little bit. I saw that conversation in the Discord and was like, oh, that's great. So, for the sake of time, we're going to skip over a few things here and keep on moving. I have I'm not going to talk much about what I've been playing because I've been on the road a lot. So, really just dove into, I've been kind of playing some Pokemon trading card game Pocket. Just this week with the drop of, I shouldn't say playing, I am opening packs. It is Pack Simulator, but there's new packs around Dialga and Palkia and that region. But they also launched trading this week, which is kind of why I wanted to bring it up. Just and the convolutedness, so much so that by the next day, they had the developers had issued a number of tokens free to all users because of kind of the high cost of trading within tiers and things like that. So not much more to say there. Tal, you're nodding your head, which means you've been opening some packs as well, but also it looks like you've been have you been playing the new update with No Man's Sky?
Yeah, just to go back to Pokemon real quick. There was a story too that came out by the developers, kind of voicing kind of their feedback on all the comments they've been receiving, or being yelled at was probably most likely just because the way it's just super convoluted, the trading now. So they were looking to maybe rework some stuff or maybe give you a little bit more, more bang for your buck as you're playing the game. So yeah, I jumped back into No Man's Sky, or I shouldn't say I jumped back in. I've still been playing No Man's Sky. Finally finished the last of the redo expeditions, which was the cursed. Man, that it was horrible. That it was just such a drag just to get through that, because you always have this kind of like there's this extra bar, or this bar that I think I mentioned this last week, that kind of replaces your shield, and it's always going down. So you always have to like craft this material or this potion or whatever to keep it up. So it's kind of a pain trying to do that. And then the last set of quests that you had to do for that expedition were you had to fight the Sentinels, which is a pain in the butt as it is already. Because when you start the expeditions, you don't have your regular gear. You're like starting over basically. So it's just kind of a pain. So I finally finished that. They released the Worlds Part 2 update that just came out, which gives you a bunch of graphical stuff that they did with the game. New lighting, which actually looks pretty nice, which I started it on the Steam Deck and I was like, oh yeah, this looks pretty. But then when I played on my PC, I was like, wow, it looks really good. And I had to bump up some of the stuff just because I had stuff lowered. And it was running fine. Like I think I was just being conservative when I bumped that stuff down. But yeah, it looks really nice. There's like deeper oceans, just new terrain that you can get into when you go on to different world or all the different planets and stuff. There's some new solar systems, which I guess I shouldn't say I guess. It's kind of, I don't want to say it's locked, but it's you can't get to it until after you finish the main story of the game, and that's near the end. It's kind of a drag. It's kind of a drag to get through that stuff because you're kind of going. You have to really fly around to different plants and stuff to get different materials to do all this crafting and stuff. So, but I've already done it once, but I've done it on my Xbox and I haven't done it on PC yet. So I might have to trudge through that, or maybe just go back to my Xbox to look at these new. I think there's like a purple star system now that you can go into, and I don't know, there's gas giants now, which they didn't have before, gas giant planets. I don't know if that stuff's also kind of locked behind the end game, but I have to read a little bit more into it. But I just finished the expedition like last night, so I hadn't really got to see everything else, so I'll have to dig into that this coming week. But yeah, I'm having as usual, having a ton of fun with this game.
Yeah, they just really continue to support that and keep adding. It's every time that something new comes out, it's impressive. So
yeah, they had one little they had what's his name, Sean Murray, I believe his name. He usually releases kind of a behind the scenes developer thing during these big updates, and they briefly mention Light No Fire again, and kind of a short clip. So waiting for that. That's the next game that they're bringing out. So hopefully that'll come out this year.
Yeah, yep, that's right. All right, Game Logic, you got the last two games here. Let's take us home.
Yep. So in addition to the Call of Duty, I've been playing a Digital Combat Simulator, and Ace Combat 7 on PC. I don't have listed in the rundown Fallout 4, which I attempted to play, but quite frankly, my PC runs it too fast, and as a result, it crashes. You can only cap it. It has no in-game, despite a new next-gen upgrade that they just pushed. Fallout 4 has no in-game ability to cap the frame rate.
Huh.
You have to cap it out at the NVIDIA control panel. And despite me capping it at 144 frames per second, I was playing it on a box with a 7800 X3D Ryzen and an RTX 4080. And every time I tried to go, I was heading for the footbridge that you go over after the bombs start falling at the opening of the game would crash. So switched and played Digital Combat Simulator and Ace Combat 7 today. For DCS, I just picked the MI24 Hind to start off in. I'm really trying to not get obsessive about it and play like the campaign and insist on doing everything from like starting the engine on the aircraft and all that. But despite that fact, I spent an hour and a half in the cockpit today, and in that time, I learned to turn on my automatic direction finder, switch my compass from gyro to magnetic, sync the magnetic compass to the local geoterrestrial magnetic field, tune 2 of my radios to the appropriate beacon frequency, and then pilot the aircraft by flying in the direction of a directional beacon. Yeah, I'll be diving through hundreds of pages of flight manuals, right? So that I can play the most simple, basic part of this game. And all I wanted to do was play instant action. But because I can't navigate to waypoints on the map, I had to learn how to do that first. So it is a grueling simulator. And then I've been playing Ace Combat 7, was much more arcadey. And that's just a big survey sim of airframes. I'm sure, if Swiss hears this, he was patting me on the back in the Discord this week, telling me to play Danger Zone while I'm flying the aircraft. So, I've you start off with the F-16C, and at this point where I've gotten to the campaign, I've unlocked the F-2, which is like a fictional nautical variant, naval variant of the F-16. And they've also given me a MiG-21 fish bed, as well as I've unlocked the SF-104 or Starfighter 104. So it's just it's kind of like Need for Speed, but for aircraft, right? You get to unlock a bunch of different airplanes, unlock a bunch of different weapons, and go fight stuff. So I'm having a good time with it.
Nice. All right. So that takes us through our 3 segments here. We've got a couple.
Can I ask a quick question? Sorry to
go ahead.
DCS, do you actually fight other planes, or is it just totally like just
Oh,
trying to
yeah.
get off the ground?
Oh no, it's a combat simulator, but it is
Okay.
like it is not like Ace Combat where you like push a button to lock onto somebody and then fire a missile. Like
Yeah,
it's
more real.
everything is modeled like painstaking realism. So I have the A10 module too, and like to fire a rocket, it's like a 15-step like flight checklist. So I'm sure it will be fun. But it's like it's just grueling. I've had the game for a while. I've played about 7 or 8 hours into it. The problem is it's a title that requires proficiency. Like you can't toe dip, even similar to No Man's Sky, right? It's like if you put No Man's Sky down and come back to it like 2 months later, you've forgotten like the do loop of how to do everything. Like, oh, how do I need to bring a like local refinery online again? So it's like that, but then like to the 10th power. So, but yeah, you do fight stuff, and I'm trying to just get to the point where I can do like an instant action mission. But like even to do an instant action mission, you have to like learn the basics. Of course, when you say basics, like basics here is like figuring out how to turn on a nuclear power plant, right?
All right. Yeah, that's very straightforward and not complicated at all, game logic. So, we'll check back in with your studies over the next couple of weeks here. So this coming week, we've got a couple big games with Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, Rift of the Necrodancer. I wouldn't say that's a big game, but definitely one that I am looking forward to. The early reviews of it seem pretty good in terms of a rhythm game. Big Helmet Heroes, which looks like kind of a 3D beat 'em up. And then the big one coming out on February 6th is Monster Hunter Wilds, the open beta. So not the actual game itself. All right, gentlemen. Warwana and Rich, thanks for joining us in the chat and your comments. Always appreciate everyone who is joining us, whether online live as we're streaming, or if you get a chance to listen to us or view video up on YouTube as well. We're glad to have you here. Always glad to have you part of the conversation. Game Logic, Talmaster, thanks again for welcoming me back after a few weeks, and glad to be back in the chair and having the conversations. We've got great stuff to keep talking about. We were going to have, half of our news stories were not great, but we definitely have plenty to keep us in conversation, talking about what we are playing and what's happening in and around the games industry as we come to you every week on a Sunday evening. So we will be back next week, Sunday evening, 8 o'clock Eastern, as we head into episode 375. This is a double-sized issue, foil embossed, hologram cover in true 90s comic fashion. So,
but only if you use the legacy number.
Oh, yes, that's true. We've rebooted this plenty of times, but this is not our legacy numbering. If we use the legacy numbering, we are much higher than that. So, all right. Thanks again, Game Logic and Talmaster, for joining me. I have been DBQ Hams, your host for tonight. And until next week, play the games you love those you play with, and take care of yourself. Good night, everybody.